I'm always interested in exploring new ways for parents to resolve their disputes effectively and efficiently, getting the guidance of professionals who have the best expertise to help the family. One of the most exciting areas of expertise that's developed in recent years is parenting coordination, and that's our discussion today.
Brought to you by AdviceScene.com. Free legal answers from verified lawyers.
I'm known for having strong views about the impact of family court litigation on parents in conflict. And I've often said that we judges whose training is primarily in the law may not always be the most qualified people to make important decisions about a child's welfare. A growing number of separated and divorced parents have chosen to resolve their disputes privately without going to court by turning to specially trained experts who serve as parenting coordinators. What exactly do parenting coordinators do? How do you find one? And what kinds of disputes are they best suited for? And how much does it cost? Let's meet our expert guests. Each of them is a lawyer, a mediator, and a parenting coordinator. Shelagh Kinney and John Paul Boyd. Shelagh, JP, can I call you JP?
Of course.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be on our show. This is a very exciting new development in family law. I can tell you, it's not that long ago, I never heard of the term. Do you know where this came from? Parenting coordination?
Parenting coordination came out of California in the early 1990s. At that point, it was called the Special Masters Program, and the idea was to divert high conflict litigants outside of the normal court process into specially trained people who have the ability to attempt to mediate and resolve parenting disputes, and failing mediation, then arbitrate them and make a decision.
So what kind of disputes get resolved by parenting coordinators, Shelagh?
Oh, typically it's to do with access schedules. For example, scheduling a vacation time with each parent, or one-time changes in a set access schedule.
So a lot of it has to do with how to allocate a child's time between the parents?
I find that a lot of the disputes I become involved in are on that topic. However, it is somewhat broader. For example, medical dental issues are sometimes resolved by a parenting coordinator, or choices of daycare or education. And sometimes even more minor disputes, such as where a child, for example, will go to school, or the daycare selection.
Well, it sounds like anything that two parents can disagree about would be a possible topic for a parenting coordinator to resolve.
Well, it's not quite that broad. I mean, parenting coordination is intended to address the problems that rise from time to time out of the implementation of a parenting plan. So that's a parenting plan that's been imposed as a result of a court order or a separation agreement or something like that.
And a parenting plan, for people who may not know the term,
it's about how separated parents manage their children's lives and bringing them up.
So where the children are going to live, when they go from one home to the other, who's responsible for decision making,
choice of healthcare, religious instruction. Does the child get his hair cut? Does he get a piercing, a tattoo? Does he stay with Aunt Billy and Uncle Billy and Aunt Marge?
Could be Aunt Billy Joe.
It could.
Well, there you go. Yeah. But tell me, what do parenting coordinators do? I mean, now we know what kinds of disputes they resolve, but how do you do it?
Well, initially we start by seeing if we can assist the parents to reach agreement on these issues. We ask each parent what their position is, and we see if they can reach a consensus. But if not, depending on the terms of the court order agreement that they're assisting in implementing, the parenting coordinator may simply make the decision. For example, decide what time a child will spend with a parent on a summer vacation.
So if I get this right, a parenting coordinator is like a judge. If they can't agree after you've tried, and is that why you're mediators as well, because you try to get them to resolve it themselves with your help?
Parenting coordination is broader yet narrower than that, right? Our fundamental purpose is to stream parents out of the conflict-laden judicial system, to help build their skills so they can resolve problems as they come up on their own. But we're we're hired on a long-term basis to resolve problems, picky and little problems as they arise from time to time. And there is an educative component to it, and there is a quick response time to it, and the goal at the end of the day is to help parents not need our services anymore at all.
But you are, in the end, if they can't resolve it, you're the judge.
That's right.
You decide the issue. So that leads me to wonder, what training do you get? I know what training I got to make these decisions. And most judges are not trained as mediators, as you are. Do you get, and you're lawyers as well, what training do you get to be able to get the confidence of people to let you make the decision if they can't agree themselves?
Sheila and I are both members of the BC Parenting Coordinators Roster Society, and the standards for membership of the Roster Society are that you have to have been practicing for 10 years, you have to be a member of a professional regulatory agency such as the Law Society or the College of Psychologists, something to that effect. You have to have additionally had training in mediation. You have to have had training in arbitration. You need to have had training in the basic fundamentals of child psychology and the basic principles of separation and family breakdown, training in skills building and coaching, and it's quite an involved step.
So how long does all that take? I don't mean the part about being a lawyer and practicing 10 years. I mean to develop these other skills, particularly the coaching, the problem-solving aspect.
Well, so you're a lawyer or a psychologist or a social worker, you've got your 10 years. In addition to that, at somewhere along the line, you're going to have had your mediation training. And in British Columbia, I think it's something like 36 hours of mediation training is what you have to qualify as a mediator. And then on top of that, there's the parenting coordination training, and you can take that either through the society when it's offered, or primarily in the US through the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. And that's a 3-day program.
So it's pretty clear to me that people that become parenting coordinators are very much dedicated to helping people resolve matters outside of the court system. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be asking more questions about how exactly this process works. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. We're back with Family Matters and our discussion of parenting coordination, a very exciting new development in family law and in dispute resolution generally. I wanted to ask you, how is this different from going to court? Because it seems to me that a lot of what you do, we do too.
No, we do a lot of what you do, exactly that. What we're trying to do is we're trying to divert people from the justice system. I mean, the kind of parents that are best suited for parenting coordination are that small number of separating parents. I think it's about 10% of the divorcing population who are high conflict. And these are the people that are in court on 10, 20 chambers applications prior to trial. They have their 10-day trial, and then they're in court 10, 20 times afterwards. Right?
On a contempt motion,
on contempt motions,
but Sheila,
enforcement.
Is this faster than going to court?
Yes.
Is it cheaper?
Hopefully so. You're still paying the parenting coordinator, but the parents share the cost of the parenting coordinator. And they have that access to them more immediately, so you're not sitting around court hoping to get on the court list.
So there's no backlog when you have a parenting coordinator. You can get right in there in most cases. And what about, I was thinking that another benefit, just from where I sit, is that it's private. There's no court record. The parents' private details of their lives are not on display for the world to see like they are at the court. Do people care about that?
These are people that are so numbed to the degree of conflict that in general they don't care whether they're in court in front of a full audience in chambers or whether they're just phoning a parenting coordinator because the problems come up.
So really the privacy aspect is not a big deal. So tell me then, it sounds like the clientele for your line of work are high conflict parents.
That's exactly it.
They're not people who would necessarily be amenable to mediation. You know, because people that mediate, my impression of people that go to mediation are people who are able to communicate a little bit and be able to hear the other's position and try to compromise. Do you? That doesn't sound like what you deal with.
First of all, there's a skills building component to this. I mean, it's not purely a consensus building followed by arbitration when the consensus building fails. We work with our clients to help them learn better and more effective communication strategies, to help them learn to listen to each other and to communicate more effectively. And as far as consensus building is concerned, when we do this work, I have probably about a 95% resolution rate on consensus building alone.
You mean you don't have to decide it?
That's my last resort.
What about you, Shelagh? Same thing?
I think so. In most cases, you're able to steer people towards a consensus. Again, because of the training and simply because otherwise they are looking at getting back into the court system. Although these are high conflict parents. Remember, we're dealing with people who already have an agreement or a trial judgment. And yet the fight continues, sometimes for many, many years.
Over all kinds of details that you were telling us about before. Mm-hmm. But they know, and they're coming to you, that if they don't reach an agreement, you're going to decide it. And they're bound by it, right? They have to comply with what you decide.
Yeah, the parents that we see, they sign a parenting coordination agreement. So firstly, they're coming to us because they've been directed to come to us by a judge, or they've reached an agreement between themselves that they're going to hire us. We then draft a parenting coordination agreement that sets out the terms on which we're going to, the subject matter, the terms on which we're going to assist the parents, and it describes in detail the consensus building process, and it says in no uncertain language that if consensus can't be reached, we'll arbitrate and resolve a decision that way.
So let me ask you, I got to ask you this.
Yeah.
If you're going to be the ones to decide it anyway, is one of the reasons you get consensus because you've pretty much hinted to them how it's going to go? If they don't agree, this is what you're going to decide? I'm just trying to keep it real. I mean, I would do that if I were you.
I think that if I have a style of mediation, I'm what they call an evaluative mediator, where I'm strongly suggesting where common sense happens to be found in the room, right? So when I'm trying to build consensus, I'm working privately with each parent and with them both collectively, and I'm not mincing my words about what makes sense and what doesn't, and what the court's going to say in the event that this winds up in front of a judge.
So it sounds to me like they get kind of an advanced ruling, and if they're going to press it, then you're going to have to make the decision. What about the kids? All of this is about parenting. These are decisions about issues that involve the child. Do you ever hear from the child or get the input of the child the way a judge would if we have to appoint a lawyer for the child? How do you do it?
Well, it's a child-focused alternative dispute resolution process. So obviously the views of the child are important as they would be in a court. It's not necessarily determinative of any issue, but I think there are cases where it's appropriate to get input of the children, particularly if they're older.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about the tattoos and the haircuts you mentioned and the piercings. Most teenagers and adolescents have strong views about these things. How do you hear what the child wants?
We in addition to the other training we also have training in interviewing children. So when the circumstances call it, we actually make an appointment and go see the kid.
How do you know that the child hasn't been bribed, coached, threatened?
These are disputes that are involving the child's life on a sort of day-to-day, almost mundane kind of level. Most children, in fact almost all of the children I've interviewed, have leapt at the opportunity to tell me what they really want to do. Because this is about, do they go to school A or do they go to school B? You know, do they go horse riding over the summer or do they play soccer? And they have opinions about this. Frankly, they want to be heard.
Why can't they tell their parents what their views are then? And then they would agree that way. Do they each tell the parent something different?
Well, that does happen.
Because that's what I see in court.
Absolutely.
I've got to tell you, each parent comes to court very frequently telling me exactly what they think the child wants, and I believe that in many cases they're not lying. The child has told each of them something completely different because they don't want to disappoint their parents. How do you deal with that?
These are high conflict parents, right? The child knows that the mother's going to react negatively to hearing good things about what happened when the child was with dad. And often it's precisely the other way when the child goes to the other parent. Most of the time, the children are happy to talk to a privileged outsider, a third party that they know is going to speak the truth to their parents. Certainly the children...
And you find it helpful?
I have uniformly found it to be helpful.
Well, this is fascinating. We're going to take another break. When we come back, the question I've been dying to ask, what does this cost? We'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back to Family Matters. We're talking about parenting coordination, and I have two lawyers here with me today who are explaining to us how it works. I want to ask you, how much does this cost?
Well, the parenting coordinators you're hiring are trained professionals, either mental health professionals or senior lawyers. Remember, I think it's the 10 years experience. So it's not inexpensive. The parties sign as part of their agreement a fee agreement to share, usually equally, the hourly rate of the lawyer who's acting as the parenting coordinator.
And if it's not a lawyer, let's say it's a child psychologist, social worker, is it still an hourly rate generally?
Yes.
So can you give us a rough range?
In my experience, the retainers that are being sought are around $3,000 to $5,000, and each party puts up half of that retainer, and they're agreeing to share the hourly rate, often equally.
So wait a minute. If they give you $5,000 and then they spend like 10 hours on who pays for pizza day at lunch at school, or how long a child's hair should be, or what costume a child should wear for Halloween, and these are, by the way, all issues I've dealt with in court, they could use up the whole $5,000.
Sure.
Cost is supposed to be a disincentive. I mean, the reality is that we're all professionals entitled to be paid for our time, but I want my clients to understand that the dispute they had about the ice cream cone on Sunday had a price tag attached to it. Right? We have the discretion to allocate our fees differently to one parent over the other if there's one parent that seems to be sucking up our time with hour-long phone calls and constant emails and constant contact.
Well, what's the hourly rate, though? I get the $5,000 retainer.
It depends on the lawyer. I do this.
Is it the same as an hourly rate for if you were representing the client in court?
Why not?
I'm just asking because I thought maybe parenting coordination using a different kind of skills might be a different fee.
No, I mean, as far as most of our members charge at their ordinary hourly rate. I do it at a discount from my ordinary rate because I recognize that these parents are often not exactly impecunious, but every time I render an account, it hurts. So I know that, and I want to be able to do what I can for these people. So I do it at a bit of a discount, but people shouldn't expect that.
But the big difference, I guess, if both parents have a lawyer in court, they are each paying an hourly rate for a lawyer.
100% of that hourly rate.
Each of them pay 100%. But in your case, they can share the cost of one professional, which is obviously half the price of two.
Yeah, I mean, the example that Shelagh gave of $3,000 to $5,000, I mean, that's what we would typically charge or ask for as a retainer for a simple interim application. So right there, you've got a couple of months worth of service at least, as opposed to a chambers application that might take 3 weeks to be heard.
Well, is there any research that tells us what the success rates are for parenting coordination as opposed to going to court?
Well, it's largely anecdotal. I mean, I'm proud to say that the clients that I've been helping, none of them have gone back to court except twice, and that was to enforce decisions that I'd had to make. But in 1994, there was a study done in California looking at 166 high-conflict families, and it looked at them the year before they hired a parenting coordinator and the year after they hired the parenting coordinator. So in the year previous to the hiring of a parenting coordinator, the 166 families had gone to court 993 times. In the year after they hired the parenting coordinator, the same 166 families back in court 37 times.
So that's a pretty strong endorsement that parenting coordination can really reduce conflict in court.
Yes.
Is there a learning component to it so that maybe the way you helped them resolve one dispute they could use next time?
Well, I think one of the issues of communication between the parents is obviously been going sideways for many years before the parenting coordinator is appointed. So, for example, monitoring of emails sometimes occurs to review and advise these parents on how they're dealing with each other, and that can assist, I think.
So you give them advice on better ways to communicate with each other, even in writing?
Sure.
Absolutely.
To be more diplomatic with each other, to be more respectful of each other?
I'm sure you've seen the emails. Look, he said this! And this is precisely what we're trying to avoid, because in terms of managing the parents and their ongoing dispute with each other, we have to be able to tell them quite frankly, this is the language that's setting off your spouse. You have to know this. Please don't use it.
Do you think that some people are in need of counseling because they're so angry and so unable to let go of all this emotional baggage that simple decisions, and you do give me the impression that most of the decisions are simple. Could get made without spending all this money?
Many of my clients, and I say this with the greatest of respect because I like them all, many of them really could use some counseling to help them deal with their emotions towards a separated spouse.
So why don't they take the $5,000 and make themselves an appointment with a counselor and do it that way?
These are people that have been engaged in a legal campaign often for years before they darken my doorway. They're so enmeshed in that mode of conflict, that expensive mode of conflict, that's how they see the resolution. Many of these people have already tried counseling, but to no avail, and they're still stuck in that combative stance.
It's very depressing because children are caught in the middle of that. And if they can't make simple decisions for their children, whatever happens, if there's a serious medical issue, if there's a serious issue with school, if a child needs tutoring, this is it's heartening to know that there's another alternative that de-escalates, or at least is maybe more effective in many cases than the court. When we come back, I'm going to ask our guests in our remaining moments to tell us how you find a parenting coordinator in your community. Please stay with us. In our remaining moments, I'm going to ask our guests how you can find a parenting coordinator if you're looking into getting one. What would you do?
Well, both JP and I are members of the BC Parenting Coordinators roster, and there's a website that they can access that will actually list out the lawyers and mental health professionals available.
That's for British Columbia.
BC.
What about elsewhere?
The other resource to try is the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts, and it's www.afcc.org. That's an international organization that has membership primarily in North America, but it's a good doorway to find resources in other countries. And then apart from that, doing a simple Google search for parenting coordination plus the name of your jurisdiction would probably help.
So, Google to the rescue again. I have to tell you, to our viewers watching at home, it sounds to me like a lot of people spend a lot of money over issues that are more about themselves than their children. Time to put the kids first. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.